from the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Practitioner Brief. It is December 2nd, 2020. This year is almost over. Can you smell it? Can you feel it? What an exciting day we have today. A lot of things to talk about. Nothing related to the elections, thankfully. Okay, so let's get right into that. Before we do, though, please subscribe to our podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. If you're listening on your favorite podcast listening platform, please subscribe and give us a 5-star review. We do appreciate that. Our Practitioner Brief can be found on our website at cyberhubpodcast.com. You can see it there. And now let's get right into today's Practitioner Brief. We have a lot of things to talk about, so I want to get right into it. The four things we're going to talk about today is the 4 million Docker images that are showing, that shows half of them have critical vulnerabilities, an open source software security vulnerability that's existed for 4 years before any sort of detection, the FBI issues a warning on BEC scammers, and critical Oracle WebLogic flaw that we reported on actively being exploited right now by DarkIRC malware. Let's get right into container security company Provasio that has analyzed 4 million public Docker container images hosted on Docker Hub and found that half of them have critical vulnerabilities and thousands of images included malicious or potentially harmful images in them. The analysis found that 51% of the 4 million images included packages or app dependencies with at least one critical vulnerabilities, and 13% of them had high severity flaws. Roughly 6,400 containers, representing 0.16% of the total, were classified as malicious or potentially harmful due to the presence of malware, cryptocurrency miners, hacking tools, or malicious NPM packages and Trojanized applications. Crypto miners were detected in 44% of the 6,400 containers, and while in many cases developers clearly stated their container images contain these miners, the miners are often hidden. System admins might find such container images undesirable for a corporate environment and even potentially harmful, according to the report. The research also uncovered images with dynamic payloads where the original image does not appear to include anything malicious, but they are scripted to, at runtime, download the source code of a miner, compile it, and execute it as well. As for the Trojanized applications, the analysis uncovered Trojanized WordPress plugin, Apache Tomcat, and Jenkins. While much of the malware currently found in the images targets Windows, malware could pose a bigger issue in the future with the rise of cross-platform threats. So, more and more companies are transitioning to the cloud. Docker obviously being used for a multi-cloud environment tenancy and containers and so many other things. Critical at this time that we start to pay attention to this. It's now really starting to get some grasp, folks. We saw it yesterday. I've been discussing cloud security since the start of COVID, and there's real aspects to that. Let's talk about an open software security vulnerability that's existed for over 4 years before it was detected. This, according to GitHub's annual State of the Octoberverse report that was published this morning. Reliance on open source projects, components, and library is more common than ever. Over the course of 2020, GitHub tallied over 56 million developers on the platform, with over 60 million new repositories being created and over 1.9 billion contributions added over the course of just this year alone. You'd be hard-pressed to find a scenario where your data does not pass through at least one open source component, according to GitHub. GitHub launched a deep dive into the state of open source security, comparing information gathered from organizations' dependency security features and the 6-package ecosystem supported on the platform from October 1st of 19 to September 30th of this year, and October 1st of 18 to September 30th of 19. Only active repositories have been included, not including forks or spam projects. The packages ecosystems analyzed one Composer, Maven, NPM, NuGet, PyPy, and Ruby gems. In comparison to 2019, GitHub found that 94% of the projects now rely on open source components, with close to 700 dependencies on average. Most frequently, open source dependencies are found in JavaScript, 94%, as well as Ruby and .NET at 90% respectively. On average, vulnerabilities can go undetected for over 4 years on open source projects before disclosure. A fix is then usually available in just over a month, which GitHub says indicates clear opportunities to improve vulnerability detection. However, the majority of the bugs in open source softwares are not malicious. Instead, 83% of the CVE alerts issued by GitHub have been caused by mistakes and human error, although threat actors can still take advantage of them for malicious purposes. In total, 17% of vulnerabilities are considered malicious, such as backdoor variants, but these triggered only 0.2% of the alerts, and they are often found in abandoned or rarely used packages. According to GitHub, 59% of the active repositories on the platform will receive a security alert in the coming year. Over 2020, Ruby and JavaScript have been the most likely to receive an alert. Defining the worst open source vulnerability of 2020 was not an easy task for the folks over at GitHub. But some bugs immediately come to mind, including obviously zero logon, SMB ghost, and when it comes to project maintainers, GitHub has named a prototype pollution and Lodlash as a top vulnerability, tracked to CVE 2020-8203 with a 7.4 CVSS score. Again, going to point out, open source are security way to integrate with DevOps and architecture and engineering is critical, especially now as more and more organizations go into the cloud. Let's go to an FBI warning of BEC scammers using email auto-forwarding in attacks. The FBI is warning U.S. companies about scammers actively abusing auto-forwarding rules on web-based email clients to increase the likelihood of successful business email compromises. The warning was issued through a joint private industry notification sent on November 25th and coordinated with CISA. The FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center also issued a public service announcement in September warning that BEC scams continue to grow. According to the FBI, BEC scammers used email rules added to the targeted web-based email clients to hide their activity while impersonating employees or business partners. The web-based client's forwarding rules often do not sync with the desktop client, limiting the rules' visibility to cybersecurity admins. The FBI does list a few cases where this has been successful, and you can read those on our website at cyberhubpodcast.com. They're abusing Office 365 and Google G Suite. In both notifications, they're showing examples of how both of those are being done. The FBI advised its IT admin to take some of these measures, including prohibiting automatic forwarding of email to external addresses, add an email banner to messages coming from outside of your organization, prohibit legacy email protocols such as POP, IMP, and SMTP that can be used to circumvent MFA, ensure mailbox login and settings are logged and retained for at least 90 days, enable alerts for suspicious activities such as foreign logins, the DMARC, DKIM, and SPF frameworks, and disable legacy account authentication as well. Our final story of the day goes around Oracle, where a critical WebLogic flaw is now being actively exploited by the DarkIRC malware. This is a flaw that we spoke about several weeks ago with Oracle's WebLogic servers that are now being actively exploited. Almost 3,000 Oracle WebLogic servers are reachable over the internet based on, according to Shodan Stats, and allow unauthenticated attackers to execute remote code on targeted servers, according to Juniper Threat Lab report. While attackers are currently targeting potentially vulnerable WebLogic servers using at least 5 different payloads, the most interesting is the DarkIRC malware currently being sold on hack forums for just $75. The threat actor selling the DarkIRC botnet on hack forums goes by the name of Freak OG and started advertising in the beginning of 2020. DarkIRC is delivered on unpatched servers using a PowerShell script executed via an HTTP GET request in the form of a malicious binary that comes with both an anti-analysis and anti-sandbox capabilities. Before unpackaging the final malware, it will check if it's running in a VMware, VirtualBox, VBox, Key EMU, or Zen virtual machine and stop the infection process if it detects a sandbox environment. Once unpacked, the DarkIRC bot will install itself in the app data Chrome and will gain persistence on the compromised device by creating an auto run entry. DarkIRC comes with a multitude of capabilities, including but not limited to keylogging, downloading files, and executing commands on an infected servers, credential stealing, spreading to other devices via MySQL, and RDP, SMB, and USB, as well as launching several versions of the DDoS attack. 1 week after Oracle patched the vulnerabilities, threat actors started hunting for exposed WebLogic instances and checking if they are vulnerable to exploitation. So that's that for that. That's it for our Practitioner Brief today, folks. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow we'll wrap up this week, and then we're back to our schedule, regular schedule programming. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. will also be live on LinkedIn with Renee and Naomi. So tune in to that. We'll be talking. We have a special guest coming on the podcast tomorrow as well. So make sure you tune in to that as well. Until then, folks, thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in. Stay healthy and stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.